Now here's one hell of a big snag that's all cut up. It's leaning right towards me, but it looks like they tried to fall it down the hill, but every other tree on this hillside, they seem to have fallen no problems, even the big ones, but this one just looks like it was hacked to pieces. They started the undercut. Then they started sawing here, and they made this notch it's all about. Those are like some kind of scaffolding or something, I don't know. It's not on any of the other stumps around here. Well, that looks like a pretty big springboard hole. So now, I didn't notice this the last time I was up here. Maybe it was amateur hours with the fallers, but you can see they kind of started a back cut. They didn't start the cut right from behind though. They came in on the side. But just looking, I mean, it's been a long time, but look closely. You can see how much a gap is there. And then all of a sudden there's nothing. So I wonder if they got pinched or something, and this was always a snag. It was never alive, even back then. And they got pinched and said, screw it, let's move on to the next one. Nowadays, it's bad enough walking away from a snag in the middle of the block. That would never be acceptable. And then to cut up a snag and leave it, I'm pretty sure you'd lose your falling ticket for that now. There's some bent 1/2 inch cable. It's tied into a knot and with a bunch of clamps on it. It's hard to tell now. The bark's grown almost all around it. That's way up in the air. I don't know what they were doing with it. Here's one of the first guy lines on the low side. Those are going uphill. There's 2 lines. Well, it's 1. It's been wrapped around these 2 trees, which are still very much alive. You can see how much the tree's grown back since, but I think this hemlock, the top's dead, but look at this, the notching they did for it. They wrapped it a couple times and then sent it back up somewhere. Just disappears into the duff now. Yeah, now we're just above first skyline, for lack of a better term, first skyline. And they got something else funky going on here. It looks like they had, yeah, they had 1 cable wrapped around a stump back there. It's a pretty sad looking stump now. And then it was so long ago that these 2 trees weren't growing here. And they're, unlike the one down there, instead of having the single cable wrapped around it going back, they have another cable here. See the splice? It just disappears into the ground. You can see it right there. Once again, it goes off into oblivion that way. Now we're up another, I don't know, 100 feet. Feels like a lot more when you're climbing, but I don't think it's much more. And we have another, I think, guy line stump. And now the guy lines are starting to go downhill a bit. So I think this is the highest one. I mean, back in the day, who knows where they went. Now they're just on the ground. They definitely weren't fooling around. That's big cable. They didn't want anything breaking. Right behind this stump is the creek with the oil drum. So I think this was the natural end of the setting or whatever. There's stumps over there, but they were probably doing something else for that later on. Never fails to amaze me. Who knows how or why this oil drum or fuel drum ended up in the creek. But in every old logging setting, there always seems to be one in a creek. It's always their final resting place. You can see that last guy line wire right there, kind of in the center of your screen on the ground. It's hard to make out. So we're not that much farther above it. That's definitely the last one, because There's this big thing. Picture doesn't do it justice how big this cable is. I don't know exactly what size cable that is, but it's got to be at least 2 inches. It might even be 3 inches. You can even see on the shackle the maker's mark. And you can see it was rubbing right there. So a long time ago, you know, this shackle was under a lot of tension, so it would have been pulled back and this cable would have been pointed up, and that way it would have been rubbing on there like that. Would have been a lot of work just to get that cable up. Holy. I can't even imagine the work that went into getting this cable up here. And then this splice they did, that would have been a pain in the butt too. Oh my God. And then holding the stump back so it doesn't pull out of the ground, there is a strand of cable. Calling it a strand is a bit of an understatement, but you see it's big, choked around the stump, going up there. And I'll walk up there now. It was quite a trek just to get to a tieback. They must have had nothing else nearby, but it's enough of a hike just walking up there. I don't know how they dragged that up there and wrapped it around and took it all the way back. It's a lot of work. You see, they did it just like the other ones. Wrapped it around and pulled it tight and spiked it. The tail hold for that big cable is right in the center of the screen. You just make out the big black square there, and you can see how far away this one stump is. I don't know how in the world this far out with that much slack they managed to get that tight. I'm wondering, since they drug this cable all the way up, wrapped it around the stump, and came back down, this is the other end of that cable there. The eye is right there. I wonder if somehow they used the straw line and just tried to pull it tight and then spiked it so it wouldn't move on that stump. That's a lot of force to get that tight from that far away. So this other tie back, funny enough, just goes to a stump 10 feet away. So I guess they were really going for broke on that one. You can see on this one, they spiked the living shit out of it. And once again, there's an eye here, so I wonder if they rigged up a way to pull it tight. But with all the wraps on the stump, I don't know how you could actually pull it tight. I'm pretty sure everyone who was working up here and knew what was going on is about as alive as this tree, so we'll never know. It looks to me from the bark that it was actually hemlock too, so I guess they were desperate back here to get any kind of a tieback stump. Now if I was a betting man, I'd say all this rigging was for a skyline, and that's the skyline right there. And as you saw with the wear spot on that shackle, at one point in time this cable was pointed way up in the air. So those guy lines many moons ago would have gone to a tree that was climbed and topped. A nice big fir tree like this is exactly what they would have wanted for a spar tree. And then all the rigging was set up, all those guy lines would have come down. And then they put the bull block up there, which is that big 1,000-pound block you see, or the big pulley you see all over the place. Those things were made for these kinds of cables to run through them on top of those big trees. And then this would be at the top of the tree, and with this stump being way back here and somewhere way down there is a 90-foot or 120-foot tree, you'll get so much lift over the hillside you don't have to worry about running into stumps and smashing wood around and getting hung up on whatever, who knows what. So that's the whole point of the Skyline. That's the best I could do with my rudimentary explanation of it all. That's enough logging school for today. Now here's just a big random fir stump with a nail someone felt like spiking out of the tree for some reason. I think I found the top of someone's thermos lid. Just in a little stream here. It seems these two trees had enough of each other and split up. One went this way and the other went up there. It's hung up in a nice big old fir. One of the few survivors. Oh, here's another Skyline stump or tree or whatever it was. Interestingly enough, they just spiked the whole thing and left the eye here this time. They didn't run it back like on all the other ones. And you can see this cable is actually still in the air. I'll get a better shot, but it's grown right into a fir tree, which is hanging it in the air. It almost gives you an idea of what it would have looked like back in the day. Well, you can see the cable's gone from this one, but just like clockwork, 100 feet down from the last one, here's the stump. I figured there would have to be one more. We're up directly across from that first Skyline stump I took a video of. It's hard to get a sense on video, but this is the draw that Skyline is sitting in the middle of. You can see they put it naturally in the lowest point on the hillside to get as much lift as they could. And funny enough, just below us in that stump is a big tree that they strapped onto. I'm wondering too if it fell over during use or after. It does look to be a cedar, which aren't known for their holding strength. One is on a little bit of a perch and a rock buff. You can see a lot of roots, so maybe it started to wiggle and they had to abandon ship on that one. They went to a lot of work with it to spike it, so they wouldn't have had to abandon it unless they have to. Maybe it started to wiggle, so they went to the tree. This is quite an interesting discovery. Never seen anything quite like this. So I think what this is a carriage. I've never seen one quite like this before, but this is what goes up and down the lines and actually holds the haul back and the chokers and everything on it. And usually on these things there'll be one there and one there, kind of where those nuts are, but there'd be two pulleys, or shivs is the proper term, just big spinning wheels that would ride this line in a rather frictionless way. But this one, from what I can tell, just has wood blocks in there, but I'm sure that's what it was. It just sat on that and rode up and down this big cable, and then when these wooden blocks wore out, they just replaced them. I guess they obviously weren't too worried about having fires or anything like that. And I mean, it does make sense, it would work. There's definitely a fire hazard involved, but it's a lot cheaper than those shivs. I don't know back in the day how much they were, but that's one cheap way to do it. I was thinking to myself, there's still no way to drag this thing up the hill, because you got this line tight. This thing would just go shooting right down the hill. So I think that's what this is all about. Whatever they were pulling on there it hasn't closed the eye up much. So I'm thinking they probably had a block actually riding in that loop, and that was for the haul back, if I had to guess. And that would drag the carriage up and down, because it looks about what a block's probably 12 inches, so that's probably what that was for there. I'm guessing it would look something like this if it was in the air. You'd have the carriage riding on that line, and then this would be drooped down just like it is now, and in this crotch right here would be a pulley or a block that would be attached to all the chains called butt rigging that has all the chokers on them. The haulback would pull on the chains and the butt rigging, and then it would pull this way, and then the main lines would pull the other way. But anyways, the block here is the key. It would go up or downhill riding on that. You can see it's the same big shackle, just like on the other one with the molly in it. And you can see, well, it's hard to make out scuff marks and all that again on this thing. And I thought this was another nut with a molly on it, but you can see it actually goes through that hole there on the carriage, and it just hangs there. And I'm guessing they just use that for something you can hook your stuff to, like we still do now. Now we hook chainsaws or gas or whatever you have to, so you can get it to the back end. It just rides on the rigging. It's just a random strap someone started and didn't finish splicing. Runs down the feet for about runs down the hill for about 30 feet, and the other finished eye is down there. While doing some more sleuthing around in the middle of the draw, just past where that cable's grown into the tree, I'm starting to find all the guy line eyes. There's a guy line eye here, one there, one there, one there, and one way down there. So I think we're getting hot. Whatever these guy lines were attached to is obviously in this neighborhood. Well, that's all, folks. I followed the cable for quite a ways. Up at that top where that big stump is with the shackle is the tail hold for a skyline, because this cable keeps going for who knows how far down there. Even though I got up to the top fairly easy, however they were yarding this, they were probably yarding for like a mile or something like that, like they usually do with skylines. All the rest of the cable is probably coiled up in a big mess somewhere down at the bottom of the valley. It's interesting too. This is fiber rope. Weird. I wish I could keep going, but that's literally the end of the lines. That's it for today. Hope you had fun listening to me think out loud and sleuth around.